Okay, Erev Tov. Oh gosh. Well, firstly, thank you for the welcome. It really was a little bit challenging what we had to go through to get back here, but at the same time, Eretz Yisrael, Niknes B'Yisur, and this is his famous statement: Israel is acquired through, literally means through punishment, but I don't like to translate it like that. Through effort. Sometimes you've got to make an effort, and sitting on the phone for 4 hours to Elal was quite an effort, especially when the calls were dropped after 2 hours. But that's how it goes. So, Baruch Hashem, we're here and very glad to resume our deliberations. We're looking at Perek Daled. What I decided to do, since we've spent about 3 months on 3 chapters, tonight we're going to do 4 chapters in one session. That's what I'm going to try and do, just to bring a bit of balance to the whole operation. The reason why is the following, that this section, I remember studying this in Hebrew school, and the teacher did the whole thing very quickly, the whole thing with the ark, the story with the Aron, and it always stuck in my mind that essentially it's one block of information, even though it's 4 chapters. So what I intend to do is to try and get through the basic points, maybe not all the psukim, but certainly what we call in Hebrew the Roshei Prakim, the sort of the main headings of what's going on, and then maybe raise a few issues, some interesting points. I just heard a very interesting shiur. Good evening. Hi. And it was very enlightening. The shiur that I heard was talking about the Mishkan Shilo. There's a very significant discussion, which I've never really looked into, as to what happened to the Mishkan of Shilo. If you remember, the Jews came to Israel, they brought with them the Mishkan. We read about it in the Torah. And in Shilo, they established it. Was there for nearly 370 years. 369, I think, is the official number. And then it disappeared. And it's bound up essentially with the story we're going to read today. It seems to have disappeared around the same time. And I think I remember when we went to visit Chol HaMoed Pesach, I think it was Chol HaMoed Pesach, we went to Shilo. It's a great place to go and visit. But you should take a guide because you really need someone to show you around. And the guide was very good and he explained to us. Sorry? Getting there can be, zone A, zone B, or whatever it's called, the different places you mustn't go into. But the reality is that Shilo was a place which seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth and not really explain what happened to it. So when we learn chapter 4 initially of Shmuel Aleph, we'll be able to make a suggestion what exactly happened to Shilo. In chapter 3, remember we had Shmuel getting the calling from God. Okay, God calls him 3 times, and eventually Eli realizes that this is very important. Hashem is calling, and you've got to basically you've got to come and sort of listen to the nevuah. He says it's a nevuah. He doesn't want to tell Eli the nevuah, so the suggestion is because it's maybe referring to the death of the sons of Eli. Another suggestion is that it's referring to the events which are coming up of the ark, because the story of the ark is really very, very serious. The history of the Aron HaKodesh, very briefly, before we get into chapter 4, is that I think the Radak, or I think it's brought somewhere like that, I don't remember now, Melachim, where he says that when Shlomo Melech built the temple, he built some very deep caverns underneath the Temple Mount. And when the things started getting bad with the Beit HaMikdash was definitely going to be destroyed, and this is something that people heard about, people knew about. They were being warned by the prophets, etc., Yirmiyahu, etc. One of the things they did is they hid the ark, and the ark is hidden somewhere underneath the Temple Mount. Okay, which is very good because it means that we won't have the problem that you're going to find in the next few chapters of what happens when you don't treat the ark with respect. Now, again, according to Steven Spielberg, it's somewhere in a warehouse somewhere in the middle of America. I think that's also a pretty interesting suggestion, but totally unrealistic. Here we're going to be dealing with the story of the lost, of not well, essentially the lost ark, but the sorry, before it was lost. Well, it's going to be lost as far as we're concerned in the story. The question of how many arcs there were, how many Aronot, all of this will come out. That's why I sent out this paper. There's just an interesting debate amongst the rabbis. Was there one ark or two? Right? You'll say to me, why did they have to debate something which seemingly would be a reality check? And the answer is because I guess, after time, these traditions sort of became a little bit fuzzy. How many arcs were there? Some say there were actually two. One with the tablets coming down from Moshe, the unbroken tablets, and then the second ark had the broken tablets. Right? We don't actually. It's like a Sefer Torah, which is possible. We don't actually take it out of the Aron. We don't take it out of the ark. We leave it there. But we put it in the corner. We tie it up and hopefully get it fixed when we can. So all of this will come out in the next couple of chapters, but listen to this because this story is wild. Chapter 4 goes the following. I'm not going to indulge in some of the ancient illnesses that are being described over here, for simple reason that we don't really know what it is. I did mention to Rhonda over the weekend that I found a book in America by a friend of mine, somebody who comes from my shul in London, who's now a doctor working in the government, and he's written a book about diseases in the ancient world of Israel. And he talks about what was going on in this particular story. He makes a suggestion, but I'm not sure if he's right. As we go into this, you'll see what I mean. So listen to this. And again, if you have the text in front of you, have your phones, Sefaria.org is still very much alive and well, and you can follow the story there. Shmuel Aleph, chapter 4. Here we go. Vahidavar Shmuel l'chol Yisrael. Right now, Shmuel is becoming very powerful. He's grown into the job. He's now recognized as the leader of the Jewish people. And again, significant as we go into the next section, Mitzvah Hashem, in a couple of weeks' time when we talk about the whole question of kingship. Please come in. Hi there. Vayetze Yisrael likrat Plishtim lemilchama. At this point, the Plishtim, the Philistines, start trouble. And again, one thinks about the overtones of this, what we went through on October 7th, and, things don't seem to change. Coming from Gaza, and they invaded. Plishtim from Lashon Polesh. Polesh means to invade. Okay, so the Philistines were good at invading. I don't have to join the dots to finish the thought, but it's pretty scary. They came into Israel. They came to a place called Even Ha'ezer, which seems to be very high up, coming, right into the center of Israel. Plishtim chonu ba'afek, and the Plishtim themselves were in a place called Afek. Again, we need a tour guide to come in and tell us exactly where these places are today, but somewhere in central Israel, maybe even in the Shomron, and some suggestion, as I said before, maybe connected to Shilo. We'll see in a minute. Pasuk Bet. So they started lining up for a battle, right? Frontal battles as they had in those days, line upon line upon line of soldiers. It's a disaster. The Jews lose the war. Doesn't seem to even raise a weapon. They're already afflicted. And it's a terrible thing. If you have not heard this story, it's pretty horrible. What happened was that 4,000 people were killed in the initial battle with the Plishtim here, the Philistines. And that's casualties, in the war now, we're talking, the numbers are pretty scary. Hello. Hi. But the numbers that we're talking about here are horrendous, and it gets worse. 4,000 initially. So what's going to happen? Pasuk Gimel, the people are absolutely traumatized. The overtones of this chapter are pretty scary, as I said before. I'm going through it, but in the back of my mind, I can't help but make the comparison of what we're going through at the moment. People came to the camp. Why have we been afflicted? What happened? What did we do? Mishilo et Aron Brit Hashem. So Shilo is mentioned here. We're going to take out the ark. In other words, we're looking for a secret weapon. All right, not the Iron Dome, but that's not in the modern sense, but certainly something which they thought was going to win the battle, and it will be the Ark of Hashem. And as I brought on this page that I sent out before the shiur, there are two opinions. There's an opinion of Rabbi I've got to get his name right. Yehuda ben Lakish. Yehuda ben Lakish says there were two arks. The ark one was the golden ark, which had the kruvim, the cherubs on top, and they had the luchot, and that was the ark that stayed in the Mishkan. And then a second ark was much plainer, which had the broken luchot, because remember the first set of tablets was broken. They were preserved and they were put into a very plain wooden box, sort of similar like we have, when you go to a shiva house, you have that kind of ark in the corner there, and that was the ark that was taken out. That's one suggestion. It doesn't fit in with the psukim, but that's kind of almost irrelevant. The reality is it probably was not like that. But the second opinion, which is the Rabbanan, the rabbis, that there was only one ark made by Bezalel, and this was the ark that they went to the Mishkan, they went to the tabernacle in Shilo, and they just took it out, as you say, without permission. In this case, without permission from God. They thought to themselves, let's go back and fight the Plishtim round two. We've got the ark, we've got our secret weapon, everything will be fine. Now, again, they missed the point, and it begs the question, what was their mindset, right? They thought that, once they've got the Aron HaKodesh, the ark with them, everything will go according to what they planned, and they were going to win the battle because God is on their side, right? And of course, the problem is, it wasn't quite that simple. The people were lacking in their own religiosity. They weren't quite up to the standard that was expected. So again, just on the page that I sent out, there's this discussion. There is a suggestion that in fact they meant to take one ark and they took the wrong one. They should have taken the simple one and they took the elaborate one. And that was why they were punished, because they took the wrong ark. That's one suggestion. But whatever happened, it was a bad situation. They were relying, as we used to say, kochi v'otzem yadi, on the power of their particular strength. And of course, using the ark as a means to an end, not appreciating that it would come to their aid, it would help them if they improve their own spiritual standard. It's always the same recipe, and it didn't help them in this case. And the disaster, it was a terrible disaster. It says that what happened, they took the ark out from Shilo, so the Mishkan is still in Shilo, right? And at Aron Brit Hashem, vayavo b'kirbeinu vayusheinu mikaf oivenu, it came and they hoped that it would produce the salvation. However, vayishlach ha'am Shilo vayisu misham, and they went there, and there's no asking Hashem, Urim v'tumim, the hotline to God, that wasn't even used. They took it, Et Aron Brit Hashem Tzvaot Yoshev Kruvim, with the cherubs. So seemingly that's the suggestion that it was the original ark and not the substitute. However, V'sham Shnei Bnei Eli Im Aron Brit Elohim Chofni uPinchas, and the two sons of Eli carrying the ark, and we're gonna go. Eila v'rechev, eila basusim, anachlu b'shem Hashem nazkir. At least that was the plan. However, not quite the way it worked out. Pasuk Hey is terrible. Vayhi kava Aron Brit Hashem el machaneh, vayiru kol Yisrael trua gedola. The people started shouting. This is an incredible addition to our army. Vatehom ha'aretz, and they started stamping the ground, and the ground, it felt like there was an earthquake going on. Right? Vayishmu Plishna. This is so interesting. The Plishtim were not fazed by this whatsoever. Vayishmu Plishtim, the Philistines heard it, Kol HaTruah, the sound of the shouting and whatever, maybe even shofar, whatever it was. Vayomru me Kol HaTruah Gdola. So what is all this noise? Machaneh Ivrim in the Hebrew camp. Vayedu ki Aron Hashem ba el machaneh, and they knew, they realized that they brought the ark, so they were aware of the ark. But of course, for the Plishtim, it was like their own God. It was a symbol, and they realized that maybe it's not as overwhelming as it could be. Again, the sort of the modern application of all of this, the fact that things are not invincible, right? I remember back in 73, that Yom Kippur, or Motzi Yom Kippur, when the news came out, and all of a sudden, the 6-Day War evaporated in about 10 seconds. From the 6-Day War, we got this sense of invincibility. Yom Kippur was a real reality check, and it was very, very difficult. and what we've had now. I mean, I just don't want to go there, but let's hope that we're coming to the end of all this. Pasuk Zayin, Vayirua Plishtim ki amru ki abalehim el machaneh. So they said God has come to the machaneh, and of course they use the word Elohim because they refer to the God of Israel as one of the gods. They don't deny there's a God of Israel, but they put him into the list of all the gods that they have. It's yet another God. And initially their reaction is, whoa, this wasn't the way it was yesterday. And they go on, who is going to save us from these mighty gods? Meaning, referring to the ark as representing a God with a small g. They know the history. And they know that the Jews went through the desert and they smote their enemies, as we just read in the parasha, Bilam and the whole story over there. So they knew about this. But then, for reasons which are very difficult to explain, they have a wake-up call. Hitchazku v'yiyu anashim plishtim. And we're told what the Philistines were told. I always remember seeing one of the movies about Queen Elizabeth and the way she used to rally the troops, right? Even though very interesting, because normally it was done by the kings. But as being queen, she had to do this. They would ride up and down the lines of troops, giving them what we would call the Hebrew word chizuk, trying to get them to, be strong in the battle. And this is what the Philistines did. They said, "Be strong, pendav tavdu leivrim kasher avdu lochem." In other words, we don't want to become slaves to the Hebrew. They had a motivation to go and do what they did. To be strong. Will fight. And they did fight. And the Jews ran away. They ran back to their tents. It wasn't just a rout or whatever word you want to use. It was a disaster, a complete destruction. It's horrible even to think about it. 30,000 soldiers dying. And of course, the numbers are rounded off. How do we know the real number? Question which is still with us to this very day, by certain people who seem to know the real numbers, but who really knows? And the reality of it is that 34,000 soldiers had been killed. A disaster, an absolute disaster. Aron Elokim Nilkach, and this was as it were, to cap it all off, the ark had been taken and captured. Ushnei b'nei Eli metu Chofni and Pinchas, and the two sons of Eli died, Chofni and Pinchas, and all of this, one thing after another. Now, what I find interesting is when this news is conveyed to Eli, we'll see what really upset him, right? Because you have the question with his sons. His sons did not function the way they should have done. Right, they took advantage of the women coming to bring their sacrifices. Some said they even slept with them. I mean, there's different interpretation what was going on. The reality of it is that maybe there's a little bit of a clue here, the relationship between the father, Eli, and the sons. You'll see what I mean in a minute. In the meantime, here comes a pasuk, which I always told the students, keep this pasuk in your back pocket, because it's going to become interesting about 10 chapters' time. Vayoratz ish Binyamin, a man of Benjamin, ran from the battle. Shilo, he came to Shilo. Umadav kruim v'aduma rusho, and he's covered in dirt, and his uniform is torn. Say the rabbis, who was it? Shaul, the guy who's going to become the king. He ran away from the battle. And what was he doing? He was, in fact, it says, Rashi says, Zaya Shaul shechataf et haluchot miyad Goliath. Wow. Shaul had already met and had a little interaction, not such a little interaction, with Goliath. Ubarachlo, and he ran away. He managed to save the luchot. He managed to collect the tablets and bring them back to the Jewish camp. That was Shaul. And again, as I said, this becomes significant later on in the face-off between Shaul and Goliath, when Shaul, unfortunately, is completely immobilized with fear. As we say, his knees were knocking so hard, he couldn't stand up straight. And David comes along, little David, not so little, and saves the day. We know the story. So all of this is sort of preparation. But in the meantime, Shaul has come back. He's completely, you say in Yiddish, verschmattered. He's completely covered in who knows what. And Vayavo, and he comes, Eli Yoshev al Kisei Yad. Eli is sitting on some sort of chair. derech mitzapeh, and he's waiting. He wants to hear the news. What's happening, right? There's no internet, so he's got to get the news by mouth. Ki ayali bo chored, he was scared. Al Aron Elohim. What is he worried? His two sons are in the front line, for goodness sake. And yet, the thing that seems to be his particular issue is about the ark. The ark was taken out. Obviously, there is an issue here, I think, of Eli realizing that it should never gone out of the camp, because he's worried about the fact if it's ever going to come back again, right? Because this is what it says. So the reality is that that's what really bothers Eli, not about his two sons. And as I said, it's significant, right? It says about King David. Why did King David's family almost all of them wanted to kill him? Terrible thing. Right, Avshalom and Adonijah, you name it. All of the sons had issues with the father, and they say one of the things that is mentioned already in the beginning of Book of Kings is that David was not a good disciplinarian. All right, he was good in battle. He knocked the block off every enemy that he could, but when it came to discipline at home, not so good. And it's just interesting that sometimes there's revelation here in the Sukkim about the relationship particularly between father and children. The mother's a bit more in the background. But listen to this. See what's going on here with Eli. It says, of course, what happened was that Shaul, this remnant from the army, comes and tells everybody what happened, and everybody starts screaming and crying, and it's a terrible, terrible event. And as I said, I was reading this, it just gives me the chills. All right, everything that we've just been through in the last 18 months, unbelievable. Pasuk Yudalan. Vayishma Eli et kol hatza'aka vayom. Of course, Eli is very old. It says he's 98 years old. Okay, which is a good innings. There's no question about that, especially in those days. And he is blind. He doesn't see, and he's just hearing. He's hearing a whole screaming going on. And he says, "Me kol ha'amon hazeh." What's going on? Va'ish mihar. So the man Shaul, as we now know who he is, comes to tell Eli the terrible news. The Eli ben Tishim u'shmona shana, as we've just mentioned, he's 98. Ve'inav kamav lo yichol lirot, he can't see. Vayomer ha'ish el Eli, the man says to Eli, I've just come from the battle. V'ani min ha'maracha nasti, I had to run away. Vayomer meh hayad davar b'ni, what happened, my son? Eli is very, very connected, obviously, but at the same time, he's old. He doesn't really, he doesn't exude any sort of authority at this point. Vayana mavaser, the interesting word that they use, the mavaser, right? The guy bringing the news. We always use the expression besorot tovot. This was besorot lo tovot. But the mavaser, the guy bringing the news, said, Vayomer, Nas Yisrael lifnei plishtim, the Jews ran away. There was a terrible affliction, a plague. Your sons died. And the ark was captured. And it says, and this again to me is so significant, he mentioned the ark. At that point, Eli fell off the chair. He heard about his sons. No, he didn't fall off his chair, right? He heard about what happened to Am Yisrael. He didn't fall off his chair. He heard about the ark, and he fell off his chair, as if his priorities maybe were not. You wonder what was going on in his mind. Okay, maybe hearing about his sons being killed would have been the ultimate thing to upset him, but to devastate him. But in this case, it was the capture of the ark. Interesting. And it says, what happened? Be'ad Yadasha, he fell backwards. Vatishover mafrakto, he broke his neck. Ve'yomod kizakena ish v'kaved, he was old and he was quite heavy, presumably didn't move around very much. Ve'hu shafat Yisrael b'im shana, he was the judge for 40 years. So Eli was significant, but never ever someone who was outstanding. Shmuel is now going to step in, and Shmuel is going to be tremendously outstanding. But of course, in the meantime, there's a terrible tragedy going on here. In the side wings, there's a birth which is taking place of one of the boys' wives who was killed. One of the sons of Eli, in other words, Eli's daughter-in-law. The Kalatoeshet Pinchas Sarah Lalat, basically she was giving birth at the time when all this tragedy took place. Vatishma tashmua, she heard the news, al lakach Aron Elohim, umeit chamir vishan, she heard that her father-in-law died and her husband died. This is it's just one terrible thing after the other. Vatichra vateled kinev chaleh tzira, and she started going into to give birth. She started having contractions. Uke'ed muta, and never she died from in childbirth. But it's just one terrible thing after the other. But those who were standing there said, "Al tiri ki ben yalad." They tried to comfort her because they saw that she was, she wasn't doing well. But they said, "You're having a son, velo anta, velo shatali." But basically, she's already died. Nebuch. But Tikra na ikavod. Now she'd already given the child that was going to be born a name, and the name was Ikabod. Right? Ikavod means in Hebrew ein kavod. There's no honor here. She named according to the events. Everything that had happened created this terrible situation of no honor. With Shaul, so interesting because with his children, there's also the idea, the name Boshet. Ish Boshet, there's Mufi Boshet. Boshet comes from Lashon Busha, right? So with Shaul, there's always this sense of things are not 100%. Here you have this story before Shaul brought the news, and the woman gives birth, and she says, "There's no glory today to the Jewish people." To which a story to which Shaul is connected to. Later on, his children become named the concept of Boshet. There's a kind of Busha, although the rabbis try and sort of spin the thing into a positive name, but whatever. The reality is that, there is this negativity around Shaul right from the beginning, which is going to be significant when we get into the whole story of Shaul becoming the king, as we will see. But he says, basically, there's no honor. Leimor Gala Kavod Misra, the honor's gone because the ark was taken away. El Hilakach Aron Elohim Velchamir Vishad, that the whole family had died, basically. But Tomag, and she had said, Gala Kavod Misrael, Kil Nikach Aron Elohim, that the ark has been taken away, and then she passed away at that point. All of this is absolutely terrible. Now, of course, it's building up to the point where we need a change of leadership. We've got leadership at the moment. We had leadership. People like Eli, they just were not leaders. They were functionaries, I suppose you would call Eli. 40 years, long time. But he wasn't in any sort of position. We're not told much about him before that, except that he tried to rein in his kids and he didn't succeed very well. And that the whole the way that Shilo was being run was run in a terrible way, right? With all the bad things that were going on there. And all of this is coming to a head now to the point where Am Yisrael is going to need a change of leadership. We're building up to the point where it's time to look for a king, right? I'm putting it in that context because everything here, from the negative, we come out with the positive. And the king of Israel, choosing the king of Israel, is a very big moment in Jewish history. Very big moment, as we will come to Mitzvah Hashem. In the meantime, right, we had split screen. So we've had the Jews and they're in terrible trouble. On the other side, we've got the Philistines who've taken the ark. What happened to them? Listen to this. This is unreal. Without getting into too many gory details. So they took the ark. They took it to Ashdod. Right? My wife just went to Ashdod. You should have thought about it when you went to Ashdod. This was where the Aron, once upon a time, ended up. It's wonderful that we can go to these places, and I think there's a fantastic museum down there of all the Philistine stuff, right? Which I still have to go and see. Listen to this; it's phenomenal. So they took the ark, and they took it to their idol, right? The house of Dagon. Dagon from Loshan Dagan, which is the idea of something to do with the nature. I don't know, whatever sort of god it was. Dagon, and they set up the ark next to Dagon, and of course it's our god. Again, it's just so bugging me when I was learning this today. The awful return of the hostages when they set up that demonstration, right? And of course, thank God, now it's if they hopefully will get them back very soon without all of that paraphernalia, because it was disgusting. It was beyond disgust. It was belittling. It was mockery, and things haven't changed. Here we've got a case. They brought the ark into Ashdod and they started mocking the power of Hashem. Hashem wasn't having this. Pasuk Gimel. V'yashkim Ashdodim imachrat. So the Ashdodim got up early in the morning, right? They left it in their place of idolatry. V'nei Dagon nafel lefanav. The whole statue of Dagon, which they worship, had fallen down. Artz lifnei Aron Elohi Hashem, before the ark of God. V'yikwet Dagon v'yeshiva Dagon. Come on, so they thought, something's happened. Maybe there was a bit of an earthquake. Who knows? So they picked it up again, and of course, v'yashkim abok el macharat. They get up early the next day, right? Which again, I don't know what they're doing, get up early all the time. V'nei Dagon. Sorry. They have to go to work, or they're going to Ashkoma, they're going to Nate's. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, that's what. It's very funny. We had a Pesach Seder. Oh, it must be 30 years ago. With I was working in a school in London with Christian ministers. They were chaplains in the school. So we invited one of the chaplains, invited both of them, but one of them came to the Seder. So at the end of the Seder, 3:30 in the morning. This was a really long Seder, with lots of discussion. The guy turns around and says to the people who were there, he says, firstly, he offered them a ride home. They had to refuse. They very politely. We're all British. But then he said, oh, wait a minute. He looked at his watch and he said, 3:30, I'm going to the equivalent of Hashkama, because it was Easter, right? And he had service at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, little did I know that they go to church at 5 o'clock in the morning. I never knew that. But he had Hashkama. So I'm always reminded with this expression of what's going on here. Maybe it was to go and pray to their God early in the morning. Who knows? This is way before Islam, so we're not dealing with that whole stuff. And it says, Mocharat, Dagon Dagon has gone down a second time. Lifnei Aron Hashem, V'rosh Dagon Ushtei Kapod Yadav. Not only that, but his head is bashed in, and the hands are missing. Krutot el Miftan, they're sort of there on the threshold. Basically, the whole statue is in a complete state. Rak Dagon Nishar Alav, only the trunk remain, as he says in the translation here. Al Kain lo yidchu kohanei Dagon kol habayim beit Dagon al Miftan Dagon v'Ashdod ad yom hazeh, and they made it a rule: nobody steps on the threshold of this place because of what happened to Dagon. Which again, the detail here is so strange. Why should I be worried about what these guys did or didn't do as a result? But again, it's all, I think, emphasizing as far as we're concerned, how terrible this was, that they made out of our degradation, they even made a new law in the worship of Dagon, which again just rubs it in how terrible this whole thing was. But listen to this. God had other plans for these people in Ashdod. They basically were smitten with a terrible disease, translated here as hemorrhoids, with 2 R's, in case you wanted to know how to spell it. Some say, as I said, this article that I read wanted to suggest that it was bubonic plague. Doesn't sound as if it is bubonic plague, certainly not the way it's referred to here. This word apolim is actually in the Tochacha. If you open up Devarim chapter 28, wherever it is over there, you get the word apolim. Not a very nice thing, and it says even worse that they were afflicted from the inside, a bit like the story with the in Egypt with the frogs. The frogs actually, sort of invaded them on the inside, okay, within the stomachs as well. So this is all pretty terrible stuff. But again, this is stuff which is obviously they seem to deserve their punishment. By the way, I just wanted to mention, and this is what some of the Farshim say, that from this point onwards, one of the extra tragedies, not even mentioned in the pasuk, you'd think it would be, is the burning of the Mishkan. The Mishkan of Shilo was burnt down. The Plishtim decided that's what they were going to do. When you go there today, they show you areas, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Mach, you remember, there was a burnt, did they talk about something that was burnt there? Didn't mention that? I had a feeling there was somewhere like that. There's a beautiful part of the Mishkan where they take you to, where a lot of women go to daven. If women cannot conceive for whatever reason, they go there. The tradition is this is where Chana daven her tefillah. So in this in Mishkan Shilo, which you can go to today, there are people davening there, and it's really very, very, very worth the effort to go and see it. It's really special. Pasuk Zayin, listen to this. They saw, oh, Gewalt, we're in trouble here, right? We've got this terrible affliction. And they knew immediately what it was because of. The ark. They knew that the hand of God, the God of Israel, was against them. And against their God, Dagon. Right? So basically, they immediately, right? They're sometimes a bit frummer than we are. If you go to Shar Rachamim of the old city, there's a outside Shar Rachamim, which is blocked off anyway. There's a small cemetery. So the guide, when I did the tour, I don't know, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, he said, why is there a cemetery there? Because they wanted to make sure that Mashiach can't come through the gate. Because, Jews don't go through a cemetery, not realizing that, the non-Jewish cemetery doesn't really have the same status as a Jewish cemetery. So they sort of made a mistake on the detail. But it's just an interesting thing. They're very frum about things, sometimes a bit more religious than we are. Listen to this. The story is unbelievable. What are we going to do with this ark? Take it to Gath. Aron Brit Elahei Yisrael. We're gonna send it on a tour. All right, it's going to be on exhibition around the Eretz Plishtim. So the first place they're going to go to is Gat. Vayaseba, I guess somewhere in Gaza, somewhere, we would know today if we said Khan Yunis or somewhere, we'd know exactly where it is. I'm not sure where Gat is. It's somewhere, maybe somewhere like that. Sorry? Oh, there is. Oh, it's Kiryat Gat? That's interesting. Karmei Gat, even. Who knows? Karmei Gat, the extra. Wow. Okay, I never thought of it. I thought it was further down. Oh, yeah. Oh, and Ekron is over there. It's the whole neighborhood. Oh my gosh. And give up Washington. That's not mentioned in the Pasuk. It's nice down there. All right, so let's see what happened. So again, thank you for that. I just didn't connect it. Pasuk tet vayachre seba hisaboto v'hiyad Hashem be'im u'ma gdola mod. So they took it to God, and there was a big tumult. There's a big problem. Again, they're all afflicted with this terrible disease. And these hemorrhoids, it was really terrible. Ekron, then he went to Ekron. They said, what are you doing? What are you bringing this sorrow to us? You're bringing it to kill us? They didn't want to know. Unbelievable. Send it back, right? RTS, return to sender, quick. Put a sticker on it. Below your mito tivetami, it's not going to kill us. And they really were affected by this. They declaring we would say a state of emergency, right? People are dying in the streets. The hand of God is so heavy. And if they didn't die, they had this terrible disease, and they cried to the heavens. Unbelievable. Again, one sort of appreciates the poetic license that's going on here. Chapter 6, and we're getting through this. Now listen to this. It was there for 7 months. And now they got to send it back. What do? So they call a meeting of all the magicians and who knows what. How can we send it back? Right? What can we do in order to avoid getting afflicted yet again? Right? From this story, we learn the bracha, at least that we don't have it today. Right? If we did have it, and it will become an exhibit in the Hebrew Museum, in the Israel Museum, oy vavoy lanu. Right? It's something which you can see from what we're reading here. We certainly would cover it up, but even uncovering it, even for a little peek, would not be a good idea. Pasuk Gimel. Firstly, you've got to send back a present, because that's their mindset. If you're going to send it back to their God, send something with, bottle of wine or whatever. That you've got to bring it like an offering to try and atone. And then you'll be cured, and then hopefully the hand of God will go away. In other words, basically, send it back, but send something with it. And this is the weird part of the story. What are we going to say? There seems to have been 5 captains of the Philistine. So for every captain, they decided to send a piece of gold in the shape of whatever shape that is of the hemorrhoids. I mean, again, we need a medical person here to explain, and I don't want to put you on the spot. The chamishach berezav, and they also sent back images of mice, because apparently the mice were like the frogs in Egypt. They spread the disease through the Pelishtim, and it's all very gory stuff. Ki mageva achad lekulam v'sanechem, all afflicted with the same plague. V'asitem tzalmei apolechem, and they made images. Don't ask me what this is. I really don't know. But Talmei achberechem, and images of mice. Hamashchitim et haaretz u'natatem lehei Yisrael kavod. Give honor to the God of Israel. Ulai, and of course the contrast is so shocking because Am Yisrael, they took out the ark without asking questions, without going through the right channels. They're not giving honor to God, and here we are, the Plishtim. They're so concerned about honoring the God of Israel. It's unbelievable. And this again is a very strong message from this whole story. It's very similar to the story of Nineveh, where the story is that Yonah did not want to go to Nineveh because he didn't want the non-Jews to teach the Jews a lesson. They're doing teshuvah, and the Jewish people are messing around with all the sins and not really behaving the way they should. So Yonah says, I don't want to be the person to bring that upon my people, and he runs in the other direction, right? The same idea. You don't want, sometimes we have to learn from the way that they react to us more than, sometimes we actually don't learn the lessons that we need to learn. Again, thinking aloud. And basically, they said, maybe we'll survive all of this. Lama techabdu et levavchem kasher chibdu Mitzrayim parad libam. And they know the history of Egypt. What happened? Why should we harden our hearts more than what Pharaoh did? Look what happened to him. Halo kasher talel behem ve'shalchum ve'yelechu. Look what happened. He had to send them away, the Jews, because of his intransigence, etc. We know the story. So what they decided to do, then nobody was volunteering to carry the thing, because they realized that any connection with the ark is going to be absolute death sentence. So they made a wagon, and shtei parot olot, and they had 2 milk cows, or whatever you want to call them, asher lo ala aleim, all without any yoke. Interesting, the Gemara Daf Yomi, we just had a whole discussion. What did they sing, the cows, when they were going up to Israel? And it says, Oz Yashir Moshe, am I right? Yeah. So isn't that interesting? They were singing the Shira, right? Whatever that means. Cows mooing the Shira. I mean, I don't know. I can't even explain it, but who knows? Tie up the cows together with the wagon, and send it away. Send it home. Put it on the wagon, and Shalom al Plishtim. It's gone. Et Aron Hashem v'natatem oto el agala kol klei hazav, and they loaded up with all the gold images, Hashem shevotim lo Hasham, which is an offering to the God of Israel. Tasimu bargaz mitzido v'shilachtem oto alot. Send it all back. We don't want any of this. We don't want the dvash, and we don't want the okets. Positet. And it's going to go up to Beit Shemesh. This is again very interesting. Okay, the way that it's going, and of course Beit Shemesh here. This is the moment that Beit Shemesh becomes famous. Apart from the story with Shimshon, of course. Hu asa lanu et hara gedola hazot. Right, that God made brought upon us this terrible thing. V'imlo v'yodanu ki lo yodo nagabanu. If it doesn't go directly to Beit Shemesh, then they're hedging their bets. In case it wasn't the God of Israel, Mikrahu Ailanu, it's by chance. In other words, always in their world, the world of idolatry, they never wanted to attribute things to the God of Israel if they could possibly explain it any other way, like Amalek, when Amalek says that it's by chance that things are happening. And of course, we don't live in the world of chance, of coincidence. We live in the world of Hashgacha Pratit, of divine providence. Now, I'm sorry I'm rushing this, but it's such an interesting story. And what happens? They left the young cows at home, and they sent the bigger cows. and they put everything on the wagon, and it says that they went up. Just going to sort of paraphrase a little bit now what's going on. And they went up through Beit Shemesh. And here comes the shocking story. Hasn't ended. Beit Shemesh Kotzrim, Pasuk Yud Gimel, the people of Beit Shemesh were harvesting in the Emek, in some sort of valley over there. I mean, Route 38, somewhere along, around the corner from IKEA. They started feasting their eyes on the ark, and they should have known better. This is a very serious question. The Kuzari, famous book by Yehuda Levi, the book of Jewish philosophy, asked the question, why did they deserve to be punished? 50,000 of them died because they looked at the ark when they should not have looked at it. It says, Agalah Ba'alasdei, Yeshua ben Shimshi, there was a gentleman called Joshua, the man of Beit Shemesh, but Ta'amot Sham Vasham Even Gedol, there was a big stone, Vayivaku et say Agalah, Taparot Ve'elu Alo Lashem, they wanted to make korbanot, the ark is coming back. However, the Leviim took down the ark, etc. So I just want to get to the pasuk. It says that the Plishtim followed it to a certain point, and then they went home because they did not want to have anything to do with it. And at this point, just to go to the end of chapter 6, the terrible thing happened. Pasuk Yutet, Vayach Banshei Beit Shemesh, and they got smitten. 50,000. It says a strange number. Kirobar on Hashem Vayach Bam Shivim Ish Chamishim Elef Ish, 50,070. So the rabbis say, what number is that? So they say 70 is the Sanhedrin, 50,000 of people in Beit Shemesh, it's a good omen for Beit Shemesh, they're as holy as, let's put it this way, they should have been as holy as the men of the Sanhedrin, of the Jewish court. And unfortunately, they did not live up to that standard. The Kuzari talks about this. He says very often, we see stories in Tanakh where the expectation is that we need to raise our game. And when we haven't raised our game, we're not holy. We treat things in a very unholy way, like we're looking at the ark and we're just enjoying it as if it's an exhibit in a museum. That unfortunately worked against the people of Beit Shemesh, and they died in their thousands. It's an unbelievable story. And the people of Beit Shemesh also complained, we're dying because of this thing, and they sent it to Kiryat Yarim. Kiryat Yarim today, go past Beit Shemesh, up the hill, where it gets a little bit flatter on the left, and Telstone and everything else over there. And that's where the ark stayed for a long period of time. It was in the place, in a field belonging to Avinadav, right? It's a very nice name. And he had a son called Elazar, and they knew how to look after the ark. And basically what happens by the end of chapter 7 is that Shmuel turns around and says to the Jewish people, maybe we'll do this next time, I'll just go through it very briefly now. Shmuel turns around to the Jewish people and says, we've got to have round 3, because you've learned your lesson. You've learned the lesson of tshuva. You've understood that you can't just go with the ark and assume that because God is on your side, everything will be okay, right? It's that notice that they have in the Jewish press. Those of you who come from the States will know what I'm talking about. During the summer, they put a notice in the newspaper about driving in the Catskills during the summer, right? Be careful about driving in the Catskills, because people drive like Meshuggahs there. And people think, well, God's on my side, because, a lot of religious people there. And they got to get there in time for Shabbos, and the traffic is always terrible going up there. And it always bothered me, the fact is that, it'd be nice in this country if there's the same thing happened here as well, that you realize sometimes it's down to you as well. It's down to God, I understand that, but it's also down to your behavior. Don't be in such a hurry. But again, this is just the way it was. The story ends with battle number 3, and it says a phenomenal thing that the Plishtim came back, right? Even though after everything that happened to them, you would think that they would have realized maybe this is not a good idea. But obviously they thought that the Jews were down and out. At this point, Shmuel stands up and says, in the good tradition of the Shoftim, that we are going to win this war. Pasuk Tet, Vayikach Shmuel telech alav echa v'yaleh olai, made a sacrifice. Vayizak Shmuel al Hashem ba'ad Yisrael v'yaneu Hashem, and God answers him. And at this point, of course, everything turns around and the war is won. Now, again, by the end of this particular story, just going to focus on one pasuk at the end. Rav Soloveitchik, in one of his sichot on before Rosh Hashanah, used to give a tshuva lecture, which I think lasted something like 2 or 3 hours minimum. And he says that there's only one place in the Bible where the word teshuva with a ta is found, and this is the word at the end of chapter 7. Uteshuvato haramata. Shmuel was so honest that he used to go the equivalent of what we called in England a caravan, an RV. He used to take all of his stuff with him. He didn't take a penny for doing what he did. He became the roving judge. He went around from place to place, and Chuvato Ramata, and once a year he went home to Ramah. He went home to his house. He went back home, Kisham Beito, because that's where his home was, and he judged Israel at that time. Teshuvato. So Rav Soloveitchik says that's the point of tshuva. We go the whole year. We're coming up to, believe it or not, Rosh Hashanah is on the horizon. Don't want to think about that. Tshuvato Ramata, that when you're traveling the whole year, you're on this circuit, and teshuva taramata, eventually you come back to the place where you started, and hopefully, you're coming back to the point where you can, recharge the batteries, and again for next year, try a little bit better. We know all the speeches for Rosh Hashanah. I don't want to go through those now. The bottom line of this incredible story is the fact of what happened to the Aron, the lessons, the tremendous downfall that the Jews suffered is just shocking, and it's a lesson again in leadership. In the end of the day, it is about leadership, and this is again, I'm thinking to myself when I'm preparing this, the whole discussion forever now has been about leadership. Our leaders, are they the leaders that we want? Are they the leaders that we can look up to? I don't know. Again, I'm going to get political, but I think the only person I can honestly believe could have led us through what we've went through in the last 19 months is the person running the country at the moment. I can't see anybody else remotely being able to do what he's achieved, what he's done. You may not like him for other reasons, but as a leader, wow, he'll go down in history, I'm sure, as someone very unique, really unique. Bottom line of this story is we're ready for a king. And Bezrat Hashem, next time, in 2 weeks' time, I hope, what is that, July the 29th, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll progress chapter 8. We ask for a king, and of course, in good Jewish fashion, they, I love this story. They come along and say, we want a king, and they're immediately told no. Even though they want a king, even though they're looking for a king, the reality of it is Shmuel is upset. And it begs the question, which Mitzvah Hashem will be dealing with, what was going on in the mind of Shmuel. If the people asked for a king, why did he not want to agree to this? So it's all to come. The story of the lost ark, right? It was lost, it was found. A lot of stuff to think about, and certainly the comparisons to today, the concept of leadership, the concept of it's not just about thank God we've got the Iron Dome. Thank God we have, what is it, Thad or whatever, what the thing is called. All of these things, I mean, it's amazing how things have come together so incredibly particularly in the last few weeks. But at the same time, we just need to remind ourselves that we need to connect to God. And I think that's the message. To me, it's powerful. It's really powerful. Any comments? Any final comments? I've stunned you into silence. I'm sorry to say that. Yes.
Well, the people wanted a king like all the other nations.
That's going to be the whole discussion. Perfect. That's for next time, because that's what we're going to see. The language of asking for a king, they may not have asked it in the correct way. Right? Jews are smart, but sometimes not as smart as they think they are. They're electing a mayor in New York, Lo Aleinu. I don't even want to talk about it because it's very distressing. And Jews are supporting him. Yeah. They supported in 1933. They supported a gentleman in Germany as well. We know that. And it's just shocking. It is absolutely shocking to me. We hope that, maybe God has another plan. Let's hope he does. Maybe they'll come on Aliyah. Maybe that's a good thing. Who knows? We'll wait and see. That was too political. That has to be cut out of the tape. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my credibility completely. I'm done. Any final comments, please?
Is it Midrash that Shaul was the boy?
It's Rashi. Rashi brings it. Yeah, Rashi. But it's so interesting that they already interacted so early on Goliath and Shaul, it just adds some spice to what happens eventually when they meet up again.
So where was Goliath there?
Well, he was a Plishti soldier. There were four brothers. There were four of them, four big guys.
Four giants.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. They used to eat the McDonald's. They were they ate well. They were big guys, right? They really were big. There were four of them all together, and he was in the army. So he had an interaction. I think Chazal want to sort of set the ground for what happens later. When otherwise, why was Shaul so freaked out by Goliath? Because he was totally freaked out by him. So that's something. We'll get to that. That's a little bit in advance, but it's such an interesting thing. Any other comments? Otherwise, I wish everybody a good evening. Thank you so much.
This guy Shaul, is he good or is he bad?
Very excellent question, and the jury is out. Yeah,
Tells us that he was supposed to do certain things that Shmuel told him, and he didn't do it.
correct.
As a result, we ended up years later with comments.
When I taught Shaul, I always handed out a box of Kleenex, and I said, "You're going to cry. Everyone in the room is going to cry," because when you learn about this guy, you realize it's the right person at the wrong time. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He would have been great, maybe at a different point in Jewish history. He came along, tall, handsome, and all the milers, right? All the pluses, but maybe not quite the character that was necessary. And of course, he falls apart. He becomes very depressed, and we're going to come to all of that, Natasha. But this story is pretty shocking. Again, the Aron HaKodesh. Wow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.